Hey everybody. So today I wanted to share something that's going to be difficult to express. This is kind of just an attempt, this is an organic attempt to draw out syncretism between the law of attraction or the law of mirroring, and through that we're gonna, it's really gonna understand how it's in the Bible and in the zodiac. Well, maybe not in the Bible, but maybe just the zodiac for tonight. And then we can maybe talk about some of these group identity thinking, like defending this kind of person's rights or that kind of person's rights. And when we talk about rights, what are we forgetting? And how can we talk about those things as well so that we can be the Logos who mediates between the polarities of being, so we can be more healed and holistic being. We can look into the mirror of the self. We can understand this is who I am, and these are all of my parts, and I'm not just a person who has rights, but I'm also a person who has responsibility. And that's kind of what I see in politics, with the rights of the left and the responsibilities of the right. That's where you get like this conservatism. Like the people I grew up with were more liberal or left in their theology, but they would be right in their politics, which is interesting. But I also want to talk about racism and the prolific nature of the law of attraction. A lot of people simplify it, but I think if anybody thinks about it for any amount of time, even what you desire to manifest in life is basically predetermined by the universe, right? It's a law, so it's there before you try to manifest things. So how does this law of attraction work with our relationships and with this idea that Black Lives Matter? The idea that this is a big idea today, lots of people are talking about it, to me shows that we don't really understand ourselves. But maybe you'll understand what I mean by that by the end of this sort of talk that I'm diving into. And this is something I'm just detecting energetically, and I think it's like something you can feel, but it's not something that you can exactly put words to right now. But I'm going to talk about it through the zodiac, because I think we can interpret everything through that symbol, and that's what we're going to do. And what are the stages of levels of consciousness? So let's start with that. So I just downloaded this image. I'll just draw it because it's good enough for what I'm doing. I might end up making my own, and I know spiritual psychology has their own images they use for consciousness. This is Jung's consciousness. Somebody drew. I could just share screen. I've got my screen all over the place here. Well, there it is, but I'm gonna draw it anyways. So I'm gonna go back to here, and if you wanted to pause that, you can look at it yourself. But I'm just gonna do the basics. They said they've added the top collective consciousness, but I think it makes sense because that's where you get It's group thinking, right? And that's something I think it's important to talk about because it gets into cults and mind control and how that works too. I actually don't need these headphones right now, so I'll take them off. Collective consciousness. Come on. Again, the persona. If you listen to Alan Watts, he talks about how that means the mask. So if you're acting like a good person, you're acting like a good mask or a good fake person, right? So, and that's not something that you can necessarily change if you study personality types, but so it actually is tied to something deeper. But going personal conscious. This is like the cosmic egg, right? And then personal unconscious. And the collective unconscious. And you need both. So there's Jung's like self, right? All the self. And up here, right, where do you put on this list totalitarianism? Well, you listen to teachers like Jordan Peterson, or if you just think about how groups think in terms of social influence, like a destructive cult will try to control the information, it'll try to control your thoughts, it'll control the social influences, it'll make everybody else bad. If you look at the continuum of what makes a destructive versus a healthy group, so there's like the unhealthy and the healthy, and up here is like the is like the collective consciousness. So this would be like the organization. So I'm gonna just pull up another image and I'm gonna kind of meld it into this one. So if we go into my images here, I'll just find it. Okay, I didn't put it there, but I know I have it here somewhere. I'll just go to the website actually. Freedom of Mind. You guys can find it on there too. And I'll screen share for this bit too. Go to freedommind.com, go to the byte model, or you can go to the influence continuum, and that's where I'm going to get this next piece of information. Individuals, leaders, and organizations, right? So you can So this goes from the microcosm to like the macrocosm pretty much. But right now I'm going to look at organizations. I'm just going to list like the top 3, okay? So I'll just switch this back. To here. So the healthy was egalitarianism, which actually leads to a greater difference in people because they're more individualistic, which is interesting. Checks and balances. Right. So there's like they're accountable, they're open to criticism, informed consent. So they'll give you all the information before asking you to do something. Instead of just trying to manipulate you or avoid your questions, etc. And for unhealthy groups, it's elitism. Like that's we're the best and everybody else is not. Right? This is like the narcissist, psychopath, uh, power hungry person. Um, Authoritarian structure. And it's deceptive. Right? And manipulative. Right? So it actually clones people, right? That's the next one. So it's like the clone versus individual. So that's if you look at the spectrum of healthy versus unhealthy. You don't want to be a fake person. You want to have genuine thoughts, genuine critical thinking, skills, etc. And and what's actually happening emotionally with that, right? What's happening emotionally with that is you're not going to be able to express your emotions in an unhealthy group because that's gonna you're not going to feel as safe to express your individuality, which is over here, right? So they're going to try to control that information with their ideology. So then you never actually, when you start to talk about your own idea, it's easy to tell what you believe because you have a belief system. So it's like these people aren't actually there. They don't actually exist. They're just part of a group ideology. And that's what you want to get away from. You want to have the true authentic self, which is which Jesus represents the authentic self. The Bible, like I actually don't believe that's a historical story anymore because I see how it was so intricately handcrafted and actually more complicated than we think it is. And based on these archetypes. But that's besides the point. So, right, in an unhealthy group, how does that happen? Well, going up and down the scale, which one allows you to be more healthy and which one is more unhealthy, right? Is unhealthy the top or the bottom? If you're focused on the top or if you're focused on the bottom. Well, by nature, the individual would be the I think I put the wrong one there actually. Let me see here. Download. Okay. So personal unconscious, personal consciousness, personal unconscious. As you go into the unconscious, you have individuals, I would say. But as you go into the unconscious, you get to your authentic self, because the authentic self is always buried in the unconscious, right? I think Joe Dispenza said 95% of the mind is unconscious behavior. Not that it's not doing anything, it's that it's unconscious, right? Your brain cells have to live, they have to be activated, so they are doing things. So the individual is more closely related to the unconscious, especially in a group setting. The group ideology unconsciously contains individuals. And so it's more, I would say that this is more closely related to the bottom, right? Or to the collective unconscious. That's where you find the individual. And if he faces the unconscious, that's where you find yourself. That's why there's people do trauma work, right? And then up here, the collective consciousness is your group thinking, or is your group identity. So group identity is more connected, I would say, up here. So we actually, if we want to be healthier people, we have to focus more on what's going on in our unconscious. And that's because a lot of people around us can see our cognitive dissonance. Whereas if we spent more time within, right, the kingdom of God is within you, we could even just harmonize one new idea with our existing beliefs. And a lot of our beliefs might fall apart. A lot of them might be refined, would stand. That's like where meditation comes in, which can help people a lot. But the point is that basically group identities is what led to these totalitarian ideas. And we said we were going to talk about the law of attraction, right? So let me kind of explain that in the Bible quickly. So I think I'm done with this for now. Okay, so here it is. Zodiac, the Mazda symbol, the Nissan symbol. But right, this is the horizon. This is the conscious half. This is the unconscious, right, which also corresponds to the night cycle, all these things. And this is the law of attraction, where it comes from, in the Bible at least. But it was always there in humans, obviously. And so I was in this conversation on Facebook, and I was like, somebody made a comment about racists, how they're ignorant, and they're really upset about that, or at least it seemed upset about it. I didn't understand why they were upset about But I basically said that what you resist persists. Now, what does that mean, right? Because that's what Carl Jung said, and I believe he said it in the context of emotional psychology, where whatever you resist persists because, well, you're taking on its energy when you resist something negative, because by the nature of negative energy, we want to resist it. But resisting it is taking on negative energy itself. Right? So that's why the Bible has these things like love your enemies or forgiveness, because then you're just holding on to this grudge. So, how is that in the Bible? Well, we just kind of explained it a little bit. Like in the book of James, I think it's T.L. Swan also calls this the law of mirroring. so the mirror, there's a verse in Job about how the sky is like a hard mirror. In James, it's about how the law is a mirror. Whoever looks at himself, whoever reads the law is like a man who looks at himself in a mirror. And that goes back to the Egyptian Nut and Jeb, I believe, and those mythology. And that explains the whole Egyptian and all these repeating covenant transition periods in the Bible, which aren't really human, but they exist because it's talking about this 40-year generation, from one generation to the next. So it's the twin brother myths, the old man to the new man, and it's about the transformation of their cosmos or the zodiac in the man. So the idea that you can just manifest something instantly is not really taught in the scriptures. It's always a transition period, and that's what I believe is happening with emotional psychology too. Where you're at emotionally with your level of forgiveness or ability to forgive will determine what you will be able to focus on or manifest. Right? So there's that framework that comes that determines what you're going to even choose to manifest. Because if you're not in a place where you're going to forgive somebody, like if you are a woman and you got raped, you're not going to immediately forgive the rapist because you're actually enabling something evil. So when you get violated or when something evil happens to you, it usually happens like in the evening. So then it would happen here, and you get thrown down into chaos. So this is chaos, or this is your victimhood. And this is the kingdom divided against itself. This is order, victimhood, all about rights, ownership, and responsibilities. Right, and this is like the day, and this is the night, and we need both in our lives to have balance. Or it's the yin and the yang. So when somebody on the street goes up to a black person and is racist towards them, what's actually happening emotionally? Why are they being racist towards them? Well, do you think the person who's angry or racist is taking ownership or is using his responsibilities or is orderly in his consciousness? I would say no, that person is in chaos. They feel like a victim, maybe of black people, and they feel like they have some rights to protect, right? So the people down here are the ones who actually need compassion, because where does forgiveness happen? forgiveness is over here. This is where the Passover happens. This is where Jesus dies and rises again. And he breaks the power of the law. So then down here is really the law, right? The law of, let's call it emotion, right? The law of conscience. And the consciousness is masculine, the emotions are feminine, okay? And this is just how it's labeled in ancient myths. That's all you need really to know right now. But as you, right, so, and it's always the transition period before the violated person is able to give forgiveness, because you need time to heal all wounds, and everything has a time. There's a time for everything. This is in the Bible too, but so these ancient scriptures have that. So how is it that what you resist persists? Well, if you can never heal or learn to forgive or express your emotions, if you're resisting expressing those emotions, then you'll never take order, you'll never destroy that racism, you'll never destroy the group identities within yourself. You'll continue to live in chaos, victimhood, and rights. But if you can learn to overcome those ideologies, and you can learn that, like, all lives matter, for instance, which is kind of what we're trying to bring to consciousness, is these universal truths, because if anything ever destroys your ideology, it's going to be a universal truth. And the fact that there is racism shows that we don't have enough awareness of universal truth. But when you come to somebody with universal truth about, like, the law of attraction, it's going to feel like the polar opposite of what they're in a place for, because they're down here in the South Pole, and the law of attraction or law of consciousness is up here, and it's the law of love. The God of love is the sky. But if you're a victim, you're looking for rights, you're a person who needs compassion. And so it's actually the racist who needs compassion, and it's the victim who needs compassion, because they're the same energetically. And they're not going to express love because they're still in a place of chaos, victimhood, and rights. And so that's why you have to love your enemies. Because if you hate your enemies, you're just taking on the same energy that they're taking on. But if you hate your enemies, that's a good start, because at least you're not lying to yourself about how you feel about your enemies. If you actually truly sit with your feelings and feel the hatred and the injustice and the pain, and you allow yourself to express that fully, then you'll actually come to a place where you can multiply that safety towards yourself, right? Because the only reason people would continue to be racist in the first place is they don't feel safe to express the negative emotion that's keeping them in those superficial emotions down here, right? So if you're down here, the most extreme is when people get angry. But up here is you go deep into the subconscious until you find that you actually need to trust yourself again. You need order back in your life. And so we have to provide a safe place, not just for racists, but for the victims of racism, to come back and to feel safe enough to express their emotions, so that once they've fully expressed the injustices they're feeling, those feelings can move through them. They can become a river of life again. They can love their enemies, especially within themselves, right? The part of them that is the racist part of them that is in chaos, that's taking on that energy. That they actually have to learn to love that within themselves in order to achieve unity and holism again. So, to me, that is the law of attraction. Actually teaches compassion and forgiveness. The problem when you go online is people think, oh, the law of attraction, that's just throwing shit in people's faces that is like an invalidation. But when I don't know the circumstances, I just know the principles that they're putting out. Right? If you just talk about rights and you're not actually expressing the circumstance that's going on, like I can address rights with order or responsibilities, right? I can address the rights by taking responsibility for happiness. But that sounds like a complete invalidation of where this person's at, and it is emotionally. So it helps to look at it like this too, because then you can actually notice where people are actually at on the cycle. So I didn't pick up that this person who was talking about racism was actually down here, and that they had a friend who had just been verbally abused, and they're trying to show compassion towards them, so they were thinking this way. I didn't know that was all going on. Do you think I would have like enabled all that abuse to happen? Well, it seems like I'm enabling that abuse to happen when I'm talking about responsibilities. But it's like you can't just throw the baby with the bathwater in these situations. So it helps to just be conscious of the whole thing. And I think this is a helpful way to understand mythology, because it's interpreting like the Bible in a psychological way too. And that's where you can come back to the kingdom of God within yourself. Because down here, the order that you thought you had, it dies in vulnerability. Because this is where the Australians get naked at Christmas, and then up here is where the sunlight clothes the earth, or clothes your psyche. Like Joseph's multicolored dream coat is the sunlight, clothed with Christ. And that's where this. So this is actually how you get meaning for yourself too. Right? People spend their entire lives trying to bring people their rights, so they're actually, part of them is taking order and is taking responsibility. The trouble is when you're purely focused on your rights and you're not actually using responsibilities to bring people those rights. Right, so it's pretty obvious stuff, but it's good to understand that there's that balance going on too, and how each one is like a little bit more masculine, a little bit more feminine in terms of like agreeableness and the big five personality traits. So 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 what about Black Lives Matter, right? Like, is there really obvious abuse going on? Okay, then we need to show compassion. We need to do those things. If there's not obvious abuse, we still need to show compassion for feelings, because feelings are authentic and we want people to be authentic and sincere. But then we also, at some point, we have to be a safe enough place that we can talk about the order and responsibilities that need to come into play. And that's where the police comes in to throw a criminal in jail, for instance. And but this idea of just going out and saying Black Lives Matter, well, if what you resist does persist, does this racist person who is in chaos, victimhood, and rights, because that's where I would say racism comes from, that sort of energy. Just saying Black Lives Matter, like to say that something matters, is it going to keep them in chaos, victimhood, and rights, or is it going to bring them instantly into order, ownership, and responsibilities? I don't think it's going to bring them instantly into that. Like, it's almost like saying torture is bad, right? At some point, it's just so obvious that it's an invalidation and an insult. And if it's men doing it, we know that, like, the basic love need for men is trust. So they're not going to feel trusted. They're not going to feel like a competitive male. So you're definitely going to continue the racism if you just tell a racist that, man, that Black Lives Matter. It's like, and people want to just continue shouting this in their faces and singing the anthem about it, so the whole country's covered in this idea that Black Lives Matter or that any group matters. Again, the problem is, like we saw before, is kind of that group identity versus the authentic self in the safe place. And the problem is, it's actually just continuing the same energy. Even though to say that seems like an invalidation of both sides. So yeah, I think I'm gonna end it there. I have to go to bed. Have a good night. If you like this topic, like and subscribe. Peace out.